Hi Kathy, thanks
Hello.
for joining me today for our Women Who Make It Happen series. Would you like to give a brief introduction to yourself and what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kathy. I have been working in financial services predominantly for the last nearly 30 years,
Wow.
Depressingly, I know.
Congratulations.
Thank you, I guess. So I started in consumer credit, really. I worked for Citibank, but City Financial in the operations, and had operational roles for a number of years, ran my own branch for a few years, and then moved into compliance and risk around 18, 19 years ago. Since then I've moved companies quite a lot of traditional banking roles, worked for RBS for a while, worked for Capital One, and then more recently moved into the more sort of fintech space. So I worked for a startup for a while, which was incredible and just gave me a whole new lease of life. Made me realise that whilst traditional banking has its place, I'm probably more suited to a really innovative, fast-paced environment.
Yeah.
So I loved that. And then after that, I went to Monzo for a couple of years. I was their director of compliance. What an amazing place to work that
Everyone
is.
knows Monzo.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exactly as you would think it would be. Just a really kind, inclusive culture. Loved it there. And now I'm at Uber Payments. I'm their Chief Risk and Compliance Officer. I've been there 6 weeks. So I'm learning to speak the language that everybody else speaks and trying to work out how all of that financial services knowledge that I've got relates in an industry that, whilst related from a payments perspective, is really quite different from anything I've ever done before. So quite a steep learning curve for me at the moment.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the new role.
Thank you, it's so cool.
CRO. If we firstly just pick up on that, so how are you navigating that difference at the moment from the traditional banks that you've worked for into Uber Payments?
I think having worked at Monzo and at Earned, I would have really struggled had I not done that, because there is such a gulf between the two. And were you to go into Uber with a traditional banking mindset of sticking within your remit, only doing the job that you're paid to do, there's a lots of needed administration and bureaucracy and hierarchy in really large organisations. If I were to take that with me to Uber, I would be hampering their ability to innovate and deliver. And I'm really passionate that compliance and risk should be an enabler of growth and innovation. So I'm really glad that I've had experiences in scale up and startup organisations before. But it's hard, just because it is a different language. Everybody there, or it feels like everybody there, is half my age. Everybody's super cool, and I'm just trying to learn the language that they're speaking and really understand the intricacies of what the Uber business and the Uber Payments business needs from me in order to be able to help them deliver some of the really exciting plans that they've got for this year and next.
Yeah, very good. A couple of bits there. So what interested you most about joining Uber, or why go for it in the first place?
So
What's the catalyst?
I think it was Monzo. Like all roads lead to Monzo for me. Monzo was such a revelation because it showed me that an organisation could be successful, as well as warm and kind, and giving people room to grow, whilst also respecting compliance and risk and what I do as a profession. So having left Monzo, I realised pretty quickly that that's the sort of culture I wanted to be in. And also I realised that brand is quite important to me, and I'd never really realised that before.
Oh, really?
But I was really proud to work for Monzo. I was really proud to work for, every time I saw anybody get a hot coral card out, I was like, that's me. that's what I do for a living. So when I saw Uber advertised, that really resonated. The thought of working for another brand that people know and respect and love, and being part of growing that brand in people's awareness. It turned out that was more important to me than I thought.
Oh, interesting. And just picking up on another point you mentioned about compliance and risk being an enabler of growth. I'm just curious because we don't hear that an awful lot. I mean, the roundtable events that we run and just dealing with some of the exco in fintech companies or some of the more traditional banking institutions, that's quite refreshing to hear. So how is that adopted within Uber, maybe, because obviously you're there now?
Yeah.
And what do you see that as being like their key to enable further growth?
Yeah, I think risk management has been better at adopting that stance of enabling growth more within financial services specifically. Over the last few years, I've seen growth in that area where people are less rigid in their view.
Yeah.
I think compliance is taking a little bit longer to catch up, and it's because people are just so wary of the regulator, and I think with regulations moving to outcomes focused rather than rules based, it relies on our judgment so much more, and that takes courage. It takes courage to make a judgment call and say, I think this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to have the courage of my convictions and implement that.
Yeah.
And I think in larger institutions that's really difficult to do, because if you get it wrong, which we all do all the time as just as part of life, it's very difficult to unpick that.
It's greater impact potentially as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Implementing a change in a bank takes months to happen,
Yeah.
and if you get it wrong, it can take years to unpick.
Yeah.
Whereas in a company like Monzo or Uber, where there are no legacy systems, there are no data issues,
Yeah.
you can make a change, you monitor that, and if it doesn't work quite the way you were thinking it might, you can pull back from it really quickly.
Yeah.
So that allows you to be a little bit more open to risks that you probably wouldn't be in a much more established institution. And it's about the people that you hire. So there are lots of really great compliance people out there that feel this way. It's a matter of finding the company that suits
I
you.
completely agree. Yep.
Yeah. So if I were to go into a really traditional like investment bank with my approach, they would hate me, and I would probably not thrive there. But there are loads of people that are absolutely built for institutions like that.
Yeah.
So I think what I've learned in my career is to find the culture and the industry
Yeah.
that aligns with the way you want to work. Because
Yeah,
I'd be
absolutely.
miserable working in an office telling people that they've done things wrong and not helping them to get it right again.
Yeah.
That just doesn't crank my handle at all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. If we come on to the culture piece then, so from your experience so far, what culture do you feel has been an enabler for you to progress in your career and to where you are today?
Yeah. So I think there was nothing wrong with a lot of the cultures I worked in. They were just very traditional.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I wasn't that happy there until I experienced something else. So Earned, the startup that I worked for, that was the blinkers off moment where I thought, like, what have I been doing with my time? This is what I should have been doing. And it was because it was a complete lack of hierarchy, everybody open to challenge everybody's view, everybody having a different opinion. And actually, it was really good for me to work with people with no financial services experience, no compliance and risk experience, but who are really hungry to understand that. And it made me realise, I think people can be quite judgmental of people that don't understand compliance and risk. Actually, the vast majority of people want to do the right thing, and that's all compliance and risk management is. So Earned really opened my eyes to that. I think you may not be able to pass the IRM exam. I'm not sure, well, I definitely couldn't. You may not have diplomas in compliance, but actually, if you want to do the right thing and you're open to learning and building a product together, then that was definitely the turning point for me at Earned, and Monzo just continued that. And Uber the same. And the difference is early involvement, really good stakeholder management, really good communication between second line and first line, and appreciating that for all, we do need people to be aware of the regulations. We do need them to work with us, but ultimately we don't exist without them. So I take the support department very seriously, and that is the sort of culture that I do well in, and that I try to build in the teams that I've got.
Yeah, okay. That's really good. And then when we are talking about building teams, I think historically there's been more male-based in traditional banking, obviously in fintech we've seen a shift.
Yeah.
How have you seen that adoption from more so from like a D&I perspective, or what changes have you seen that have really been taken up throughout your career?
Yeah. So in most of the senior leadership or executive teams that I've been part of, or boards, it has been very male dominated. Uber is completely different. Our board is entirely female.
You work for Claire, don't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
So our whole board at the moment is female, which is so cool. And
I'll be spotlighting all of you at this rate.
yeah, absolutely. But that's a really refreshing environment to be in, because I've just never seen it before. For me, it's I prefer balance in all things, and I don't think any board or senior leadership team can be effective without having difference of thought, different experiences, and not just from a gender perspective, but from a social mobility perspective or ethnicity. Like, I'm a passionate believer in diversity and inclusion at all levels, and a lot of the organisations I've worked for have seen really good levels of representation of underrepresented groups in all the way up to sort of management level. But above that, that's where I've found it challenging for people to get through. I think the days of women having to act like men to get promoted are gone, or I hope they are. Certainly when I was in banking in the 90s, I got my branch because I was brash and loud and took up space in a way that I wouldn't have to do now, or I certainly hope I wouldn't. In the compliance and risk world, though, bizarrely, I found it to be much more female dominated. This is the first, I've got an all-male team at Uber. It's the first time that's ever happened.
Oh, right.
But the majority of my team have been women. I think that's partly because, and this isn't to my credit at all, I think I've had a tendency to recruit in my own image. So I've always employed women a lot. And I take very seriously my obligation to not pull the ladder up after me, and make sure that I provide opportunities for other women. But equally, what I don't need is an echo chamber. Nobody needs a room full of me's making decisions. So I really passionately now try and make sure that my teams are blended in every way possible. And when you work for startup, scale-up fintech companies, they tend to be really on board with that approach. So they don't have the same sort of tired old recruitment processes that we used to have back in the day, which is really refreshing. Yeah,
we see it from both sides. The traditional banking institutions have a set process, whereas the fintechs pivot, are a little bit more agile in what they need to do to get the right people in. So yeah, I absolutely agree. Touching on you mentioned social mobility, different backgrounds, etc. Do you think that has been something that has been a key success factor for the likes of your team in Monzo or Earned or Uber? Now, I know you're only 6 weeks in.
Yeah. I think so. From a social mobility perspective, I don't know. I think because all of those companies were London-based, I don't really know how well we're doing on a social mobility perspective. Certainly, in every other regard, diversity is everywhere. So I love that I was walking through the Uber offices in London yesterday, and I must have heard 6 or 7 different languages being spoken. There are of course white English people working there, but I wouldn't have said that we're the majority by any case. It's really, really well balanced, and I think that's why they're so good at being creative and innovative, because they do have that variety of thought. That if everybody in the room has got the same background, we do tend to have the same thought processes, and that just stifles innovation. Yeah,
it comes back to the conscious, unconscious bias of being maybe a little bit more aware of who you're recruiting, who you're bringing in, to give you that diversified approach, really.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of unconscious bias tests on myself. There's Harvard University, and God, the results are so depressing, but really good to know. So my test came out. I had a strong preference for white people and a strong preference for white men, especially. You're just absolutely horrified at yourself, because and I'm such a militant feminist as well, but it was a really good example of how these things are programmed into us, and only by knowing that about ourselves can we really try and address them. So now I really try and call myself on it when I see it happening. I really try and call myself on it, and redress the balance as much as I can.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And if we touch upon your leadership role, you've been in leadership roles for many years in your career. So what inspired you to take on a leadership role?
Do you know, I don't know. I think I've just always tried to take the opportunities that have been presented to me. A few years ago, especially about a decade ago, probably around the time I met my husband, so he'll take all of the credit himself, I just decided to start saying yes to the things that scared me. I've always battled imposter syndrome, and found that really hard. And then I had a mentor a few years ago while I was at Provident, actually, a guy called Connor, and he told me after a few sessions, quite brutally, that he thought I was using imposter syndrome as an excuse not to do the things that frightened me. And it was a very direct conversation, and he absolutely nailed it. It was absolutely correct. So since then, I've really tried hard to say yes to things. So I've found that throughout my career, I have been quite successful in getting opportunities.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is my privilege.
Testament to you.
Well, I mean, I'll take some of the credit for it, but I definitely think it helps if you're white and middle class and went to a private school. None of that hurts, does it? So I've been lucky to be given those opportunities, but I have been brave enough to take them.
Yes.
And then I found that I'm quite good at the leadership role, I think, because I'm probably a bit less formal than some leaders. I think people respond to me a bit better. I'm quite open and honest about the challenges I've had with my mental health, and various other sort of challenges I've had throughout my career. So I think people respond well to that. What I have found, though, is that a leadership role in an organisation where you're more of a figurehead than an active participant in the department is not for me. I find that really dull. So
you like to be involved in the here and now.
I want my team to have full autonomy and to do whatever they need to do, but what I don't want to do is tip up on meetings and give sound bites and not actually contribute to the running of the team in any way, or the contribute to the direction of the company or the strategy or just the day-to-day decisions that are being made. So for me, for all, Uber is an enormous organisation. Uber Payments is quite small, so it's a really nice balance for me in that I sit on the board, I support my CEO Claire in strategy decisions and all of that leadership role, but I also get to roll my sleeves up and do a load of PEPs and sanctions screening and
enjoy.
What
you're passionate about.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So I hope I know what my weaknesses are. I know that I'm not always particularly creative in my solutions, so I always hire really creative people.
Yeah.
And I do well in teams that bring that to me. I'm also quite impulsive. I make decisions quite quickly. On the insights wheel, I'm like 80% yellow red. So which means I talk a lot, but I get stuff done. But my attention to detail isn't.
I'm very blue and red, so I think I could take a leaf out of your book.
We'd work well together. So I have no blue, which is interesting for a compliance person because we really should. So I need people in my team that have that attention to detail and that diligence, because I'll fly by the seat of my pants and go all maverick.
But that's why you said you recruit people around you to be those other eyes and the voice of challenge. So
and that's what I haven't always done. I think as I've matured through my career, I've always talked about inclusion and diversity, but I've always hired people that are just like me. And you think, well, that's just a nonsense. I need to see the value in the attributes that other people bring, and they might not want to chat about their morning for 15 minutes, and they might not want to see pictures of my dog, but that doesn't mean, although to be fair, I do judge those people. But I appreciate the values that people with that real attention to detail, that real diligence, and bring in a way that I haven't always, I don't think.
Yeah, okay. You've had nearly 30 years in financial services.
Yeah, I'm so tired.
Well, you won't be able to tell it, Kathy.
Okay, thank you.
Advice that you would give to your younger self, what would that be now, reflecting back?
So in my early days, when I think about some of the stuff that happened when I was a young woman working in financial services in the 90s, when I think about some of the stuff I put up with.
Do you mean from challenging situations or navigating?
Well, just outright discrimination and
that's not good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was part and parcel of the industry back then. I don't think it's like that now.
No, I think it has moved on an awful lot,
but it was
still
like the managers' meetings when I was a manager would be on the golf course. And I was the only one that didn't play because I was the only woman who didn't have to play golf. So I would be trotting across, bringing them beers on the golf course. Always had to pour the tea and coffee. Just really, and some really extreme examples of that. And I just put up with an awful lot of it. I was one of the pick me girls, which is oh no, it's fine. I don't mind it. It's great for my career. I think I would tell myself now.
No.
Just absolutely not.
You don't want to subject yourself to that because you're opening the door to further discrimination almost.
Yeah. And if I saw that happening, my sister does the same job as me as well, and we worked together for about 15 years. And if I saw it happening to her, I'd set the world on fire. But I don't know why I accepted that for myself. So I would definitely tell myself to pack that in and assert myself much sooner.
Yeah.
And I think I would also just try and fight through the imposter syndrome earlier.
Yeah.
I think it does get easier as you get older, because at this point I've been working 30 years. If I was rubbish at my job, I probably would have been found out by now. So I can probably just stop that now. And that really does help. But I was absolutely riddled with it for years, and it really hampered me emotionally and from an anxiety perspective. It was really tough. So I would definitely tell myself that. And then lastly, I would say remove yourself from situations that are toxic or do not suit you. Yeah. If you can try and affect change, but if that doesn't work and if you're unhappy, get out. There's been 2 or 3 times in my career where I've taken backward steps because I wasn't in the right environment, and it was really impacting my mental health. I've had a couple of what I would describe as breakdowns, really, caused by huge levels of self-imposed, in some cases, stress and anxiety, but also just not being in the right culture for me. Yeah. I would have a stern word with myself now and say, just walk away. Trust your judgment, because our instincts are there for a reason. Yeah. And if I think you know pretty quickly if a work environment is right for you or not. And if it's not, don't do this whole, but I need to be in a job for 2 years for my CV. That's nonsense.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, I give the same piece of advice to anybody we work with. So.
Yeah. And I've done it a few times, and I stand by it. And if in any interview where they ask me about jobs where I've moved on quite quickly, I'll be really happy to explain to them why. And any company that doesn't want me because I've protected my own well-being, probably isn't the right fit for me anyway.
Well, that's it, exactly. Yeah. It comes down to culture fit, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about some of those challenges you face, but I think testament to you and resilience, and you are Chief Risk Officer over at Uber Payments.
I know.
So
it's going all right, isn't it?
It's going all right, Kathy. Better than all right. Just finally then, if you don't mind, because we usually try to provide a platform here to celebrate you, also to give some words of advice or impart some guidance onto younger female talent. You said you're a feminist. I have a very balanced team as well, so it's really important for us as a business. What advice would you give to any younger female coming into the financial services industry, or even coming into the career world? What do you think the key success factors should be?
So I think find a mentor. Find a mentor that will talk you through the softer side of things, because anybody can learn any job. We like, especially in compliance and risk, we like to make out that it's this like dark art and nobody could possibly understand it. It's basically,
it's a learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody can read a rule book and understand it. Yeah. It's all about how you interpret that proportionately and from a perspective that's like operationally viable. That stuff you get from talking to people and learning and backing your judgment. So I would definitely say find a mentor and find the right mentor. Coaching too, I've always been a bit rolly-eyed about coaching because I've had a few coaches over the years, and I've always found it really awkward and uncomfortable. I had a great coach at my last role who was really, really good at challenging me in really positive ways. So if you can find a good coach, I found that really helped me make really good decisions about my future and my career. And I would say, as I would say to my younger self, do the things that frighten you. Mm-hmm. Take the opportunity, even if you're not ready. As women, it's well documented. And I still do it now. When I was job hunting this time around, you see a role profile, you've got 90% of it, you think, oh, but I don't have a degree, I didn't go to university. Yeah. Well, I did for 6 weeks, but I don't think that counts. So every job I've ever applied for has had degree on it, every single one. Yeah, and it's never been an issue, but I could so easily not have applied for those. And looking back, I have not applied for a lot of roles thinking I don't have that really niche bit of experience that they need. If other people are going to judge you based on things like that, well, that's on them, but don't hold yourself back. Put yourself in it, put yourself in the running, and back yourself. I think I love to see it. I do some interview days for school kids around West Yorkshire where I live, and I love to see school kids and girls at school, like 15, 16-year-old, they've got so much confidence and so much about them, and I just wasn't like that. I have real hope for the future because kids now are really, especially young girls, like young women, do back themselves. I don't think it even occurs to them that they shouldn't apply for a job because it's more suited to a man. I just don't think that happens now. Yeah. I'm sure it does in some areas, but far less. So I love to see that, and I think we just need to encourage that as much as possible. So find yourself good people. I'm really lucky that I've got so many friends, so many female friends, as well as my sister. We have a little network of us against the world. If you can find your people, that's really crucial.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we do this. So it's a platform to celebrate yours and other female in leadership roles, and to give that platform and something back. So, well, thank you very much for joining and your words of advice and just you and your career history. So, thank you, Kathy.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.